Facilities that make this program possible are provided by the City of Highland Park. Programs are produced independently by members of the community. The City of Highland Park is not affiliated with the following program or the producers of public access programming and is not responsible for the content. The following program does not reflect the opinions of the City of Highland Park.
Welcome to Chill Out. I'm Pam Chill, one of the Highland Park senior producers, and I'm very fortunate and very excited to have as our guest today Mr. Jeffrey Adler. Welcome to the program. Today's topic is going to be about how to protect yourself and your family and know the facts about long-term care. So I'm going to give a little bit brief background on you. Alrighty. So you formed Executive Capital Resources in 2002, and then you bring 30 plus years of experience as a highly creative, service-intensive, trusted advisor focusing on holistic, financial, and protection planning. You also provide your clients and advisors with dedication, enthusiasm, and trust. You offer experience and insights into understanding business and personal challenges, and you act quickly yet thoroughly in achieving results. Also prior to that, you managed life insurance practices at one of the largest financial services and insurance brokerage firms in the Midwest. You're an active member of the Association for Advanced Life Underwriting, which is a life and qualifying member of the $1 Million Roundtable, and a regular industry speaker and author of professional articles on life insurance planning techniques. You're a graduate of University of Wisconsin, a chartered life underwriter, CLU, and a founding board member of Supporting the Spirit Foundation. Welcome again.
Thank you very much.
So it seems like you're quite an authority on life insurance, and your specialty is then long-term care.
Correct.
I noticed briefly when you described it, what is holistic life planning and financial planning? How does that vary?
We try to take every part of a family's situation into account when we're providing recommendations and learning about their situation.
Okay, because everyone is different. Everyone has different needs in financial planning. Mm-hmm. Okay, who should get long-term care? And when would be the appropriate, how young can you be to get long-term health care?
I think everybody should learn about long-term health care. Mm-hmm. And the ages where it's most appropriate are probably from your mid-40s through your low 70s. Although many people don't believe that you can take advantage of some of the offerings when you're 70 years old, in many cases you can, and you can do so quite efficiently.
Okay. But if you get it too young and you're not going to need it when you're, let's say, late 70s or 80s, how do you factor in inflation? Because they're setting a certain term now, and then, 20, 30 years from now, who knows what the cost is going to be?
That's a very, very good question. There are many ways of funding long-term care that build inflation into the formula. So although you're getting involved in it when you're very young, you're hedging inflation so that your purchasing power of the dollar keeps pace with what's happening in the world in which we live.
Okay, very good. Should your financial plans, your retirement, let's say your pension funds, your real estate holdings, your income, be reviewed and modified with regularity and contributing to long-term care?
Yes, indeed. We believe that you should annually review your entire situation. We recognize that everybody's situation changes. Their family dynamics change. as well as what goes on in the marketplace with regard to things that you've mentioned, like inflation, like interest rates, and people's priorities change over a period of time. So it's important to understand that and to be able to provide recommendations with regularity that fit those situations.
Does your own individual health or health of a loved one, would that factor in too?
Absolutely. Your health, the health of a loved one, your family history is very, very important in taking these things into account. Absolutely.
Okay. How do you handle the potential of large payments for long-term care? Right now, what is it running for long-term care on an average per year, the cost?
To provide the protection that you need, there's different levels of long-term care.
Yeah.
You can start at
Elaborate.
home care where you need some type of assistance in your home, all the way up through full-scale nursing home or community type settings or assisted care settings. And dependent upon where you live, that's going to determine the cost to provide those services. On the North Shore, as an example, just to provide home care, unskilled care coming to your home with some regularity, let's say 2 shifts a day, 5 days a week, that's going to cost anywhere between $1,800 and $2,500 on a weekly basis. And keep in mind, that's after tax. So if, God forbid, somebody were to have some type of a cognitive impairment where you could live until you're 100, but you do require the assistance, that could be quite a costly affair.
Yes, I don't think people realize how much it is. And is Illinois one of the highest states as far as what our care costs compared to other states? How do we rank?
We rank in the upper quartile, and it really depends on, as I said, where you are and the average cost.
Depends on
in
the
that
areas
particular
of
area.
Illinois.
Correct.
Right, okay.
There's parts of Illinois that are going to be significantly more costly than other parts.
Okay. Tell me about what does long-term insurance actually cover? And is there, do they all have deductibles that have to be met? Or just tell me a little bit about how it works.
Some long-term care products work similarly to health insurance, where there is a deductible and then payments are made over a particular period of time. Those payments that are made are paid on a monthly basis, and again, inflation can be factored in, so those payments can be increasing.
Now, the payment is usually made to the patient or the recipient and not to the facility they're at.
That is correct. Patient control or family control is something that's very important. We deal with many families that prefer to have control. So therefore, if we can have payments coming directly to them, they can determine how those funds are utilized.
Right.
So absolutely, our preference is to have our clients paid. Now there's many programs where there are no deductibles whatsoever.
Oh.
And long-term care is triggered, payments are triggered when you can't perform 2 activities of daily living.
And which are those?
Activities of daily living are the first 5 or 6 things that you do when you get up in the morning. You move, you get out of bed, you go to the bathroom, you shower, you toilet, you get dressed, and you transfer. You go from one place to another. So as soon as you can't meet 2 of those activities, a long-term care insurance contract starts the clock, essentially.
So in order to do that, yes.
And those are relatively easy qualifications to meet.
Does Social Security assist in any way?
It does not. There are no governmental programs that provide this type of benefit. So this benefit you need to do the planning for. And that doesn't require you always to go out and buy an insurance product. It's very important to make sure that we target some dollars to help defray those kinds of costs. In many cases, there's some sense financially to going to a third party, an insurance carrier, but in many cases, it's not something that's of necessity. It really, again, depends on your situation and the kind of wealth that you've accumulated over the course of your lifetime.
What is the difference between a catastrophic insurance policy and a long-term care policy?
A catastrophic policy is something that pays for a particular circumstance, and the circumstance has to be highly elevated.
So it would be an illness, a fall that...
Well, an illness more so. A fall is not a catastrophe. A fall, you could get payments for a few months, as an example. And you may not require those payments again. So it really depends upon the situation.
Because there's so many things out there in the marketplace, it's hard to define which one,
It's very difficult.
is needed.
It's very difficult as a consumer without professional assistance, not only to determine whether to go into the open marketplace and buy a product, whether they should stockpile excess retirement dollars. You need assistance. It's very, very difficult to compare apples to apples on your own. And in many cases, the information that's available publicly is not enough. We strongly believe that professional advice is necessary.
Right. And then absolutely fine-tuning it to your own individual needs. Right?
Absolutely.
Yes. How do you fund your long-term health care? What would be advisable?
Well, you take a look at everybody's situation individually. And perhaps there are some savings that are available. Perhaps there's some qualified money. Many seniors are taking required minimum distributions from their old qualified pension or profit-sharing plans. And in some situations that may be necessary. It may not be necessary, or a portion of that. As we retire, the Social Security system also pays us monthly. And sometimes you can use a portion of that. But again, it really depends upon the family's budget and where they want to focus on providing the care.
Now, there are a lot of people, let's say in the retirement age, there are a lot of people who have pensions, and the pension is too high to ever go on government assistance, as far as going into a nursing home that would be funded by the government.
Correct.
Because they're making too much money, and they'll always have that pension, of course, as long as they live. So what happens to the people that are kind of like in that donut hole that they can't quite afford an assisted living? They're about $2,000 to $3,000 short per month. So what happens to them? I mean, how can you manage their portfolio?
Well, we try to work with them, and again, we work with their family. Perhaps there's children that either live in the same area or perhaps don't, which is a bigger situation. And their financial situation may be a little different, and we utilize the next generation down because we all are going to take care of our parents. And we want to do that as efficiently as possible. And in many cases, some, if not all, of the financial burden may fall on the children. And certainly the delivery of care falls on that next generation to a great extent, even if they don't live in the same area.
they still have to provide or.
Well, it's much
right.
more complicated.
It's much more
If
complicated.
you have
yeah.
children that are living in California and you're living in the Midwest, how do you provide that care? And how do you check on that care and make sure that the right kind of care is being provided to your mother or father?
Absolutely. How would one go about choosing an advisor to help with long-term care arrangements or portfolio to do for insurance purposes?
Many people have trusted advisors around them, and I would strongly suggest that you raise that issue amongst your trusted advisor group. In many cases, if it's not an area of expertise that they have, they will refer you on to people that do have that expertise. However, I think that it's very important, as I said, to have somebody that has some experience in that area and has some experience furthermore in doing the type of holistic planning that we spoke of at the beginning of the program.
Right.
To be able to work with more than one generation to determine the best way of providing care. We know that the vast majority of people will require some type of care as they age. We're all going to need some assistance at home, even if it's getting up and down a flight of stairs. So it's very important to do that planning generationally and not with blinders on.
People don't like to think that far ahead. I think that might be it. We also, you mentioned fair versus equal in some of your notes that you sent me. In families, like who provides the care, who makes all the decisions. Obviously, when there's one child, that one child would do that. What happens? I just wanted to go a little bit about, like, if children are estranged and being, like you said, the parent lives in the Midwest, the child lives on another coast. So what precautions can be done or provisions can be made, and how is this all orchestrated?
Well, that's where the planning becomes very, very important. And when I mention multi-generational planning, that's where this is crucial. Because when you have more than one child, your children are going to have different levels of capabilities. And you don't want to tear at the fabric of your family in order to do this. So it's important. Family meetings are very important. Breaking out the responsibilities and having a conversation about that is very important. Committing those things to writing. That's what basic planning actually does. It commits those things to writing. So when there is a catastrophe, there's a map that everybody has looked at and everybody has participated in order to know what the next steps are. It's not good to have a fire drill as your parents are being wheeled into a hospital.
Absolutely. But you do have a lot of children out there who, I think this generation or the next generation, they expect their parents to leave them money. So how do you present the speech that, look, mom, dad, us, whatever it may be, are going to set aside this much money for the fact that we're going to need long-term care and we expect to live well into our, early hundreds or whatever, and that all that money is going to be tied up. So there may not be, at the end, anything for them.
Those are tough conversations. Those take a fair amount of time. They require, as I mentioned, family meetings. And I think that when you peel the onion skin back, most children want the best thing for their parents. And even though some of the generations may have somewhat of an entitlement mentality, from a planning perspective, there's ways of preventing that and making certain that the matriarch and patriarch are taken care of through their life expectancy, those are difficult conversations. This is a very difficult, touchy, sensitive topic because at the end of the day, you're correct, Pam. Children have expectations, and perhaps they have expectations of the wealth that the parents have accumulated over time. However, they need to act like adults and grown-ups and understand that you need to take care of that older generation.
Absolutely. Now, what plans should be made when you're dealing with children from first marriage, second marriage, spouses from second marriage? How is all this factored into the financial planning and, whose guardianship or who takes care? Or, that person obviously takes care of themselves until they cannot.
Absolutely. And that's when I mentioned to you that having regular meetings, our preference is annual, is to take care of situations like that because...
And there can be changes in the family structure.
If your advisors don't know of those kinds of changes, and those are significant changes, that can create potential problems. And in today's world, as you know, second and third marriages are much more common than they were 25 years ago. So regular, disciplined family meetings with your advisors is crucial because financial plans can be modified to take those things into account. No different than if you have a child that is the next internet billionaire. That child doesn't necessarily need their parents' help, but you need to factor that in.
Right. You can have one child who starts a startup company and it's bought out by, another company for $2 billion, and then you have another one who, if you don't provide for them, they'd be with a tin can on, the Venice
They would
Beach.
have difficulties.
Right.
And that goes further into children that have special needs.
Yes.
There's ways of planning particular for those people. So it's very, very important to have regular meetings as well as meetings with the entire family and meetings with the parents and with the children individually.
Do you think it's more beneficial, though, to tell the children that they're really not going to have much money?
Well, you don't know that for sure.
Oh, okay. But
But absolutely.
There could be the possibility that they should just be on their own and they should kind of not factor that in,
that may be the
that
best
their
thing.
children's education will be paid for and then their house will be paid for and whatever, when long-term care, and if they didn't get the long-term care insurance, they have to realize that this money is set aside to caring for their parents.
Absolutely.
And it's going to go rather quickly.
And that may be the best thing that a parent could do to a child, is to say that you have to make it on your own. No different than we hear stories in the media, with the amount of money that billionaires are giving away to charitable organizations, not to allow their children necessarily to not know what it is to have to work for a living and build something on their own.
Right. There's a sense of entitlement in having a privileged life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And your planning helps with that, but I think more importantly, your family meetings, and I think that the values that you've created within your family over the course of the raising of your children is where the bulk of that comes from.
It will be a test of true love.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You see who gives you the birthday card.
Well, it's full circle. You don't want your parents to become children again. However, some diseases create that situation. So you need to become the mother or father even though you've been the child.
Right. Do you think there's too much role reversal, though, that the middle-aged children are becoming the parents, and sometimes they're a little too tight or too watchful over what they might want to do?
I think that it's always a work in progress is what I would say to you. I don't think adding additional pressure to a family unit, a husband and wife, with younger children, adding stress to that unit is never the healthiest choice in the world, but it's how we all manage that and how we provide and how we love that determines how we do that. And it doesn't have to be just a husband or wife. It can be a same-sex marriage. It makes absolutely no difference in terms of the love and the caring and the role reversal
But we have to,
that occurs.
it has to be legally defined, as far as, assets and what you want this much to do and whatever, that should always be done beforehand, I guess.
I think it's important to have those discussions, as I've said, and the planning or the conversations, the open forum conversation is really where the rubber meets the road. A couple can financially plan and dictate or mandate where their assets go. However, to make a smooth transition, I think that it's important that the next generation is involved.
Absolutely. I just wanted to touch on the subject of home health care versus nursing home care and, cost-wise, how that's factored in. And for the long-term health care insurance, what criteria has to be met for them to pay?
Well, again, that's a very good question. And we know you don't want to move out of your house unless you have to. So home care, I think, is the first line of defense. As I mentioned earlier, home care, not on a 24/7 basis, can run anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500 weekly. As you get to more levels of assisted care where more care is necessary, those costs do go up. It's not uncommon in our area, in particular in this area, where full-scale care is anywhere from $150,000 to $200,000 a year. And if that goes on for a long period of time, regardless of the wealth that you've accumulated, it's a lot of money.
Oh, it is, yeah. Because also you're talking about shifts, you're talking about 24-hour care and
Do you need a nurse, or can you work with a nurse practitioner, or can you work with an unskilled home care person?
Right.
How many meals do you need? It's not good enough just to have a meal brought to you. If you have some type of a cognitive impairment, you need somebody sitting with you to help you eat, to prevent you from starving to death.
Right, or choking on the food too.
Absolutely.
So, right, that has to be factored in as well. So if you see one mistake that people make in long-term health care, what would you say that is?
I think that people assume that the government is going to pay something for this type of care, and that causes people to not deal with this in the present. And it's important to deal with it in the present. It's important to always be educated in order to make good decisions. Because you have a meeting doesn't mean you have to do something, but you should know what the landscape looks like.
Well, I thank you so much. With that, we're going to head on out. Mr. Jeffrey Adler, who is talking about long-term care and how to be the best of future long-term care. I thank you so much, and thank you for appearing on my program. And I think we really learned a lot. There's a lot that has to be factored in about family issues and finances.